this computer. Okay, so welcome aboard. The session is now being recorded. So this is part one of our two-part session on qualitative methods and applications. The goal of these workshops is to provide you with a somewhat rudimentary, but also intermediate. I'm not going to go into the really advanced areas because some of you here are very new to qualitative research. So I don't want to totally overwhelm you with that. So I'm going to be pacing myself accordingly. I'm going to try to keep pace with your learning and your pace so that we can take something out of this session and make it meaningful for our careers. So we are talking about demystifying qualitative research because there's so much intrigue and so much confusion about what constitutes qualitative research. People know that, oh, well, qualitative research is the opposite of quantitative research. That's not a good enough answer, okay? Because it's not quite the opposite. There is no such thing as an opposite of something. It's just a different modality. It's just a different approach to research. Before I go into the first slide, I wanted to just open this conversation up about what it is that you understand when you hear the expression qualitative research. And if you can keep your answers short in about 2 minutes or so, that would be nice so we can give everyone a chance to talk. You can raise your hand or just start talking. It doesn't matter. We are a small group of 10 or 11 folks, so there's really no need for a formality.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I can.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead. Who is that? VM, do you want to give the lady a chance first, or you want to go first? VM says he'll give you the chance. Go ahead, Ranjita.
Okay, thank you. So qualitative means I can say it's like where the participants can express the things in their own words. It's not like they're telling some numbers in one words or something. It's like studying in depth, like rather than focusing on some data or something like that. It's like knowing about their stories and all, like what I can understand about.
Okay, very good, very good. Anybody else?
Good evening, sir. Good morning, sir, at your end, and good evening to all other participants.
Who is this? Who is this talking?
Sir, I'm Megha Jain, sir.
Oh, Megha Jain. Okay, yeah, Megha, go ahead.
Sorry, I was on my way back to home, so that's how I was keeping silent. Sir, qualitative to me, it's an exploratory study, more of exploratory study, wherein we do not have very confined thoughts, or we are exploring on, we're directly studying the subjects and exploring, and it helps more in theory building, and of course, I feel that we all know that probably after we build the theory, there would be a requirement of testing it also, but it's more of inductive, and you record things as they come to you, and you do not interfere in between the way they are happening. That's how probably we would be able to best observe and record what is actually happening. Maybe.
Okay.
That's what. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Anybody else?
Yeah, maybe I can go next, Anil.
Yeah, go ahead,
so
Siddharth.
I have zero background in research. I'm a practitioner, so when I hear qualitative research, I look at it as something which is non-quantitative. Number one, something which is so that's one. Second, it seems to me like it can be more abstract. And third, it is something where there is a lot of room for going in depth and going over and beyond what you see, hear, read. That's what qualitative research seems to me, Anil. I also want to make one quick observation here. I think this is a great, very healthy group that you have, and this is the first time I'm seeing that 80% plus the group is women. So which is extremely positive and heartening to see. I just
As a
wanted
matter
to
of fact,
that.
in all of my groups, no offense meant to men, but I'm always surrounded by women. So most of my groups, I would say, at least 60 to 70% of the group participants are women and very eager to learn and very eager to grow. So thank you, Siddharth, for acknowledging and noticing that there are women in this group. Oftentimes, we gloss over all of these finer things, and we feel that it's a, and especially in a traditionally patriarchal society in India, women sometimes become invisible. So this is good that you notice. Yes, an increasing number of women get drawn to research in general and also to qualitative research in particular, at least from my experiences. So go ahead. Anybody else?
Yeah, hi.
Siddharth, that was really good, Siddharth. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. This is Ajanta Roy. I work as a qualitative research consultant based in India. Qualitative research, according to me, is something wherein you understand your target audience, not just the verbals, the non-verbals, not just what they're saying, but you actually try, understand, relate, and uncover the thoughts behind what they are saying and not saying. It is understanding the why of a particular answer that they give without being very straight about it.
Okay. Very nice. Who else would like to go?
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to second what everyone has been saying about qualitative research, it's more in-depth. It tells you the how and why of either a concept or, from my perspective, public health perspective, a disease or something like that, rather than quantitative, which just gives you a pattern of who it affects, what effects are seen, and where this happens. Qualitative kind of complements that in the terms of how these things have started, why they occur the way they occur. So I feel like what you were saying is absolutely right. They're not opposites of each other as well, and they more or less complement each other if you really want to find out
Absolutely. It's not that one is happening at the cost of the other or one is happening at the expense of the other. Most great research that is done internationally is done through a combination of qualitative and quantitative. As a matter of fact, you all have heard the expression mixed methods. What is mixed methods? Mixed methods, you could have a numeric quantitative study with all graphs, charts, figures, diagrams. And then in addition to that, you have a qualitative piece where there's a narrative which you're piggybacking on that. So yes, you are absolutely right about that. Anybody else?
I'll just make an attempt.
Yeah.
Qualitative research, to me, a lot has been said by all the participants. So I don't know whether I can add more, but for me, qualitative research is more about the hypothesis development in the way, exploration, and basically about the storytelling of that entire concept which we are trying to say. What happens in a quantitative research is that we know to some extent that we are studying, say, a volatility or something. We know the methods per se. Whereas in qualitative, it is, the hypothesis and everything develops while we are conducting our research, secondary research. For me, that is qualitative research.
That is very nice. Who was this talking? I didn't quite catch your name.
That's Nupur.
Nupur. Okay, Nupur. Yes. That is very profound. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing it. Anybody else? VM, I'm sorry, you got overlooked totally. Right.
So Anil, as in fact, I'll share a little of my background. I'm
Sure.
doing my research on, the culture of innovation in my organization. I want to understand why there is no any such great culture of innovation is there an organizational requirement that we can't be innovative, or is there a requirement to be innovative now? Because we are looking at a lot of indigenization and all. Our organization depends a lot on imports, so we want to cut down on imports and develop something on our own. So my thought process initially when I started, don't we have the we have the pedigree, but we have the mental capacity to be innovative, or are there any restrictions? So I started with a quantitative methodology purely because that is demanded by the university from where I'm doing. They are purely management oriented, so they look at quantitative studies only. But as more and more I'm going, almost 3 iterations I have done, and I'm not getting much headway in quantitative. That is when I saw into this qualitative. Maybe this concept of innovation or culture of innovation is more related to qualitative aspect of the individuals and the thought process and the functioning of the organization. So I was thinking now, since anyway I'm stuck with the quantitative part, I cannot get away from the quantitative part. So probably I'll have to follow a mixed methodology. That is where I thought qualitative will help me. So that is how I entered into this workshop. And,
Great.
for me,
Great.
qualitative is like all others have explained. It is basically you need to try and understand the phenomena behind any particular happening, or any particular feature in an organization,
Right.
or any aspect. So to understand that, probably you need to understand the emotions behind that, or the human being, the human aspect behind that.
Very good.
Are finally run by human beings. So that is where I think probably qualitative will make a lot of sense.
Right, right. Well, all of you have shared bits and pieces of what qualitative research entails. All right, and it's all great stuff. We don't expect anybody to be the expert on qualitative research, including myself. And as I said, I'm still learning, still growing, still evolving in the field of qualitative research. So let's now get into the nitty-gritty and take a look at what are we really talking about. Because until you know the theoretical underpinnings, the theoretical philosophical foundings, or the philosophical underpinnings or foundation of qualitative research, you would be doing only disservice to the approach, because you will try to know, hey, I know the technique, I know how to do action research, and I know how to do ethnography, or I know how to do narrative research. You'll only learn the technique, but if you do not understand the overarching underpinnings, the overarching foundation of qualitative research, okay, the philosophical, you're not going to be able to do much progress in the field of qualitative research. So with that in mind, I'm taking you through this short journey of what really qualitative research means. Now, when I say this, I don't necessarily mean this approach or this technique or that. I'm talking generically qualitative research in general. Okay, so let me go to the first slide. Because of the equifinality of writing and doing qualitative research, the lack of a boilerplate need not mean that the kingdom is lost. What is lost in structure is gained in the ability to be creative. Thus, one might replace a nail with superglue or other bonding agent. However, whatever you use, the burden is on you to make sure that the adhesive adheres, that is, your story coheres and the shoe holds tight. So this is an expression or a quote by Michael G. Pratt from one of his really famous articles that he wrote on qualitative research, which I found very illuminating. So what is he really trying to say? So what he's trying to say is, in qualitative research, there is no set structure. There is no set procedure of doing things. Now, that doesn't mean that there is no scientific method. I don't want you to confuse that. But when I say structure, I mean, when you're doing quantitative research, you will have a certain way, a certain protocol of going about it. You'll send the questionnaires, you'll get the numeric data back, You will analyze the numeric data through modeling or whatever approach you use, and you'll set up some hypotheses, and then you're out to prove or disprove the hypothesis that you set up. Okay, that is not what you do in qualitative research. In qualitative research, you do not have a 1, 2, 3, 4 step of doing something. Right? And that's what makes qualitative research a bit challenging for the researcher, because if you're not used to, as Siddharth was saying, things can get very abstract in qualitative research. So if you are not comfortable with levels of abstraction, looking at a situation from multiple perspectives, you're not going to be able to do great qualitative research. So in this, what he's saying is what is lost in structure, because qualitative research does not have a preset structure, preset procedure of doing things. So what is lost in that is gained in the ability to be creative. So you're called upon as qualitative researchers to be creative, to be original, to be novel. Okay? So you might replace a nail with super glue or other bonding agent. He's just trying to make an analogy. So, you don't necessarily, if in quantitative research, if they say you have to use a nail, you have to use a nail. Meaning, if this is the way you're going to do it, this is the way you're going to do it, because the modeling does not allow you to do it in a different way. You have to follow that. In qualitative research, there's a lot of freedom to analyze, to interpret, to make sense of, to make meaning of something in a variety of ways. So no two researchers doing research on this, even on the same phenomena, will come up with the same way of doing it. Every researcher brings his or her own personality, creativity, their ingenuity into building this. So whatever you use, the burden is on you to make sure that the adhesive steers or sticks. That is, your story is coherent and the shoe holds tight. Okay. So please know that you're going to be in the realm of not knowing, a lot of uncertainty, not knowing where you're starting and where you actually might end up. Sometimes those 2 points are very, very vastly different. Okay, so how do you then navigate such difficult terrain, such a difficult journey? It's not for everyone. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. And I've had occasionally some students and some researchers, they'll jump into my forums and they start to put all sorts of contradictory ideas, contradictory threads into the conversation. It's kind of like dropping a rock in the pond to dispute, to argue, to have one-upmanship. They want to make sure that quantitative is the only way to go about it, because this is all bogus. The one guy told me, a young guy, and I believe it or not, I felt bad for him, because he has his master's degree. He's wet behind the ears. He doesn't know much about research. He's read a few pieces here and there, and he works for an organization that does quantitative analysis most of the time. So he's saying, oh, this is all science. Quantitative is all science. This is the way we go about it. And all this stuff, this qualitative stuff, is all bogus. So what am I going to do with a guy who is so closed-minded, who's not open, who all he wants to do is lock horns with me and argue? And I've had a young lady that did that many years ago when I first did my first workshop on phenomenology in India. I don't want to say the name of the institute, that doesn't matter. But she locked horns with me. She started telling me that in qualitative research, especially in phenomenology, the researcher that's doing an in-depth semi-structured interview with a participant is actually going native. She did not quite understand the meaning of going native because she heard the expression going native and she wanted to throw that expression around. So I asked her to go back and do some homework, do some readings, and discover what, for herself, what going native really means. Going native is an expression that we use in ethnography, where a researcher contracts with an organization for a period of time. It's not for 90-minute interview. It's usually for 6 months to a whole year. They're embedded, they eat, drink, literally live and breathe with those participants from that company in order to understand the company's culture, because ethnography is derived from the word ethno. Ethno means culture. She didn't understand the basic idea. And she went on and on and on, locking horns with me and trying to make me look stupid in front of the group. Now, what am I going to do? I really felt sorry for her because she is misinformed. She was not trying to be a good student. By good student, meaning somebody who opens her mind out to learning, rather than using her faculty and using her energy in combating me. So what am I trying to say? What was the point of sharing these two anecdotes with you? Is to say to you that unless you're open-minded, you cannot become adept at doing qualitative research. It'll call on you, on your creativity, on your openness, on your ingenuity a lot. So let me go to the next one. So qualitative research involves, as some of you said, stories and narratives. What are stories? Are we talking about sharing fairy tales? No. What is a narrative? Anybody?
Consumer's journey in their own terminology.
Exactly. Your journey, a consumer journey in their own way, in their own words, on their own terms. So when you're doing qualitative research, some of the things that come up are you as a researcher able to tell a good story? What do we mean by that? Are you able to tell a good story? What do you mean? I mean, it's kind of odd. What story? Sir, हम तो research कर रहे हैं. इसमें story क्या बतानी? Ranjita, what is the story that we are talking about?
I want to say somewhere sometimes data cannot capture the whole thing. If you're studying a person, then something some details or something new we can find out from their stories, like from their words, how they're experiencing the that incidents or that for example some disease. In case of some disease, how are they experiencing, what are their problems. It can only be find out by qualitative research, not by data alone.
Good. So you're talking about non-numeric data. By the way, friends, data doesn't always mean quantitative data. Data also means qualitative data. So story, an episode, or a narrative that is shared with you is also data. Sometimes one student said, sir, actually not a student, with all due respect, an assistant dean who was attending my workshop at Symbiosis in Pune, great guy. He was very, very distinguished guy. I have a lot of respect for him. But he said to me, कि सर आप ये बोल रहे हैं, but आपका data कहाँ है? So for a second, I thought he was just kidding with me. No, I said, are you serious? I said, I've been talking about all this stuff. He said, yes, but data किधर है सब? तो इसको एनालाइज कैसे करेंगे, इसको इंटरप्रेट कैसे करेंगे? ये तो सारी स्टोरीज हैं. इसका डेटा का, इसके मैंने कहा, सर, डू यू मीन नंबर्स एंड फिगर्स? एग्जैक्टली. भाई उसके बगैर कैसे चलेगा ये? So, and he was being very honest. He was not being cheeky. His dilemma, his quandary was, कि ये इतनी लंबी stories, narratives, all abstract stuff. लोग अपने emotions और feelings और सारा दुनिया भर का चीज आपको बता रहे हैं. उसमें research कैसे करेंगे? It's a very legitimate question. How do you analyze that data? How do you make sense of that data? Because until you can analyze data, you cannot start making interpretations, right? So how do we go about that? Are you comfortable with your and others' pathos? You'll hear the expression pathos. आपने सबने सुना होगा, ethos, pathos, and logos. They come from Greek expressions. Ethos is ethics. Pathos is deep emotions. Logos is logic. So are you comfortable as a researcher with your own feelings, deep, tender, down below feelings and emotions? Because if you're not comfortable with your own feelings and emotions, how can you make sense of the feelings and emotions of other people? Very difficult. Is it not? Are you okay with having voluminous, non-numeric data to research? So to give you an example, so if you're doing 10 interviews, your 10 interviews, in-depth interviews, समझो कि you did 60 to 90 minutes per interview. Do you know 10 interviews will generate about 275 to 300 pages of transcripts? I'm not kidding you. It's a lot of data. So are you comfortable with having so much data to analyze? How are you going to go about it? Have no fear. We will help you get through this. I'll show you the techniques on how to make sense of that voluminous data so that it doesn't overwhelm you. Okay? Are you comfortable listening to evocative descriptions and discursive accounts? Because when you're interviewing people, you're going to have a lot of discursive. Discursive means rambling. When somebody's telling a story, तो आप उसको वो तो बोल नहीं सकते कि बिल्कुल ये structured story बताइए. So they're jumping from one thing to another thing, and they come back to the same thing. So it's all involved, very convoluted. They're all dots, different dots. How do you connect the dots? Are you able to work patiently with the lack of structure and procedures? Right? So these are just, I don't know what the answers to this is. You have to ask yourself the question. Right? So what do you think? So Kiran, you're listening very intently to all this stuff because you're doing a lot of healthcare research there. So मैंने कहा आपको पकड़ते हैं. So what do you think? I mean, because I'm sure, Kiran, you're probably also doing a lot of the quantitative, right? As a physician leading a team, you do a lot of quantitative because, you know, and medicine contains a lot of quantitative data.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what do you think about this?
I think like working with both, we've seen that qualitative is definitely the more challenging area to work in. And some of these questions that you have brought up, we're just recently dealing with these problems where we've had to go back and change everything and redo our interviews to make sure that it's not as systemic or concrete, and let the conversation flow more in depth so that we're able to, get those pages of data that you're talking about. So
right.
I think we're facing that as an in an ongoing project at the moment. And every single point that you've mentioned, I feel like we're coming across it, and this gives us a good time to reflect upon it and see where we can
Exactly.
build on it. Yeah.
So folks, so thank you, Kiran. So what we are saying is that this is a safe space for you. Nobody is going to look stupid. Whatever you say, just say it. Don't hold back. Just say it unabashedly, unashamedly. Nobody's judging you. This is not an exam going on. So this is where you can take a chance. This is how I learned, by looking stupid in my career. Many times I didn't know what the heck I was talking about, but I just said it anyway. And then everybody turned and looked at me funny. But they were very supportive. They said, no, Anil, what you're trying to say probably is this. And I said, oh my goodness, I should go back and do some reading before I say it. But if I had not said that, I would not have been prodded to learn, to engage, to grow. That's how you grow. You grow by mistakes. Okay, we all make mistakes. We all make errors of judgment. We all make errors in our work. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the journey. It means you're at the beginning of the journey, especially in academia and also industry. I want to hear also from a couple few other folks who might want to say, Ajanta, what do you think about this? What kind of work, Ajanta, do you do within organizations? Because I know you do a lot of qualitative research.
Well, I'm pretty much intrigued, hearing what ma'am Kiranmay just mentioned. Like,
Yes.
I have been specializing in healthcare studies, and we have been doing a large number of studies, for healthcare. In fact, I'll quickly tell you about one study which was amazing, which I'm never going to forget. This was about manic bipolar depression. I had physically gone to Karachi, and I had interviewed not just the patients of manic bipolar depression in their chains in the asylum, but I had interviewed the topmost doctors out there. Most of you might be knowing, that Kakhe is a place in India wherein, you have these asylums where the manic bipolar patients are actually, kept for rehabilitation. So
Ajanta, what is the name of the place you said?
Kakhe in Ranchi, Kankhe.
Kankhe. Let me write it down.
This is Kakhe in Ranchi.
In Ranchi, okay.
Yeah. So this is a place in India. So this was a study on healthcare, the most important one, which I'm never going to forget. So the study was basically done by a pharmaceutical company wanting to understand how does they, how should they actually, come out with the medicine so that the patients have it regularly, so that the patient relatives, the patient, maybe the spouses or the kids and all that, are in a position to give it to the patients. Because manic bipolar depression is a chemical reaction in the brain, which obviously nobody can control. I mean, it can be controlled with medicines, but you cannot be cured. So this study, the objective was that for the pharmaceutical company. Now my job was to go there, talk to the patients, in that kind of a situation, because they have their ups and downs, interact with them, try to understand them, talk to the relatives in their houses and try to understand, because anytime the patients get aggressive, and also go to the chemist and figure it out, and ultimately trying to find out what would make the medicines acceptable. So the quick insights that we got by interacting to all of them, including the psychiatrist who gave us 1.5 to 2 hours of one-to-one session, we understood that the packaging needs to be attractive. The packaging not mention anything that it's a medicine, and it should be colorful. It should be given in such a manner, that the patients are also happy about it. And I mean, these were the different things, like, that were basically found. And ultimately, the company did manage coming out with a titrated kind of a dose in different formats. Formats meaning it was not just capsules, it was capsules and tablets and liquids and all that stuff. This was one example of a pharmaceutical study. So basically, as a practitioner, like I have been working in different categories. This was one, we've been working in the categories of alcohol and cigarettes, beverages and I mean, it could be a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. I mean, there are a huge number of stories, but then it's been amazing. And whatever has been discussed till now, I mean, I can 101% relate with everything. It's been a beautiful journey. And this is really going to be great for all of us. I'm sure.
Great. Well, and I will commend you for your passion and fire. With the passion with which you talk about your work, my goodness, I hope everybody has that kind of passion. The world would be a different place. So thank you, Ajanta, for sharing
In fact,
that.
let me tell you one thing, guys. I was late in getting into this, and Dr. Anil really, thought that, I'm the 11th person not wanting to get into this. But I requested him, earnestly that, yes, please take me in. And he did that. And I'm so happy and so indebted because I'm really happy to be with all of you, including the youngsters and senior veterans like you. Thank you so very much. This is a gratitude straight from the heart, Anil.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you all here. And like I said, there are different people at different levels of expertise. And we want to have a level playing field. Everybody can enjoy, have fun learning and growing from it. Because, if learning is irksome, if there's a barrier to learning, that barrier is usually inequity that gets created when people don't feel comfortable to say something because they feel, oh my goodness, if I look stupid, what is everybody else going to say? So it's a small group. We are only 11 people, 10 or 11 folks here. So take a chance, take a risk. And because the only risk in life is the one that you'll never take. And you'll regret it on your deathbed someday that you didn't take that risk. So, hey, I'm a classic example. I got my PhD at the age of 60, ripe old age of 62. I will be 70 on August 15th. But I'm still, hopefully, I have a little juice left. So I'm making use of my creativity and my little energy that I have left to make a difference. So that's great. Thank you. So let's go into the next one, the convoluted nature of qualitative research. When dealing with qualitative data, the researcher is typically working with a participant's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and perceptions as they relate to the study phenomena. So let me just pause there. So unlike in quantitative, where you may send 100 questionnaires out to respondents, right? We call them respondents. In qualitative, your research folks are called participants. In quantitative, we call them respondents. They're responding to the research questions. So in qualitative, the research is typically working with participants' thoughts, feelings, emotions, and perceptions and attitudes toward a study phenomena. So what is that study phenomena? What is this phenomena that we talk about in qualitative research? Anybody? What is this research phenomena?
Not sure. I'm just taking a stab at it. Is it a research question?
Okay, you're very close.
Objective.
Okay, research objective, research purpose of research, right? Goal of research.
No, I think it is the nature of the research. Nature
of research, goal of research, purpose of research. How do we go about doing the research? It's all of that. They're all of ancillary. They go into that. But what is the research phenomena?
Sir, I'm just making an attempt. Is it that we observe a pattern of things and then we want to find out what is it, how is it, and that is a research phenomenon? Is it like this? Then we would develop research question and so on and so forth.
Okay. So this is a good segue into.
Can I say?
So phenomena. What is the phenomena?
Sir, is it the whole process?
Phenomena. Beta, phenomena kya cheez hai? What is the phenomena?
Is it the whole process how the qualitative research is carried on upon?
No,
like the whole methodology.
That is what you're talking about is the approach, is the strategy, is the technique. This technique is not the phenomena. What is the phenomena? Kis cheez pe research ho rahi hai? What are we researching on?
That's what something we observe, and now we want to dive deeper into that.
Into what?
That
Into what?
something, some
The
pattern
study.
of things that is happening.
Yes, you're getting
Some
close, but you're not there.
correlations and associations.
I understand, but about what?
The subject of
वहाँ
research.
Subject matter.
वही तो पूछ रहा हूँ, subject क्या है?
The participants.
No, उनका participants का feelings
research कर रहे हैं.
So my question is, what is this study phenomena? So, okay, let me give you an example. I don't want to make it more hairy for everybody. Let me try to simplify it. But this is a good thing. See how we are able to look at different perspectives of the same thing, and we get close to it, but we don't quite get there. This is the journey in research, especially in qualitative research. You're getting close and close and close, but you're still not there. So let me give you a research phenomenon. Okay, so what is it like? I'm going to share with you what this is a research question. Okay, what is it like for an unwed mother to raise a child in a single family household? Now, if I were to say this question, this is a research question. So if I ask you, what is the study phenomena? What is it that we want to research within that question?
It's the experience of that mother in raising the child.
The experience, the lived experience, we call it the lived experience of raising a child in a single
Family.
household. Unwed mother, mind you. She did not marry. The child was born out of wedlock, mind you. I said unwed. I hope everybody heard that.
The emotions.
Emotions.
The challenges.
Challenges. What could be the challenges? Who's this speaking?
Ajanta Roy.
Ajanta. What challenges are we talking about? Unwed mother hai. She
सोसाइटी के challenges है, family के challenges है,
family के challenges हैं.
कमाने के challenges है. I mean, you need to work, you need to earn, you need to kind of,
There you go. Let me tell you, Ajanta, what you just said here. All my expert students struggle to make sense of. In that research question, they are not able to establish the research phenomena. Kis phenomena pe wo kehte hain, some will say, sir, we are researching unwed mothers. Some will say, so we researching single parent household. Some will say, some of you would say, sir, we are researching the babies.
Yeah.
But is that what we are researching? First of all, whose lived experience are we researching? The lived experience of the unwed mother, right, Ranjita?
Yes, sir.
Unwed mother's experience, lived experience, and I'll get to the lived experience. The lived experience of the unwed mother, that is what we are researching. But lived experience of what? Is it just the experience of raising a child? Yes, that is true. She's going through an experience. But what did Ajanta just say?
And how is it different from raising a child in when she's unwed, and when like if we can compare it with like how is it different with if a woman is married and if she's unmarried, like how is the experience different from them?
But our research question is not going about contrasting and making a differentiation between that experience. We are simply talking about, and again I'll repeat it, what is it like for an unwed mother to raise a child in a single parent household? Because she'll be single parent, right? She doesn't have a husband. The husband is not there. He abandoned her, left her with the child. Hota hai na society mein? The men will impregnate the woman and then leave her to her own devices to fend for herself. So what did Ajanta say? The challenges, what the helplessness does she feel as she goes through each day? So remember, when we are talking about a research question, the research question has encapsulated within itself the research phenomena. The research question is not your research phenomena. Let me give you another example.
Sir, one more time, can I make an attempt here?
Sure.
I'm just trying.
Go ahead.
So here in the research phenomena probably is that there is a fixed, fixed means somehow it has been established. Social structure, stigma, social norms have been established. The way people are designed to live, and something which is going in contrast becomes a point of study, that how is it happening to them now? Something which is going beyond the so-called established structures like norms or social norms. Are we trying to study that? Is this kind of research phenomena something which is unusual in the usual setup that society has established?
So we try to focus in on who your participant is. Your participant, who is your participant that you're researching? Participant you're researching is an unwed mother.
Mothers, right.
What about her are you researching? She's narrating her experiences to you.
Right.
She's sharing her lived experience of what? Lived experience of what is she sharing?
Living a little against the social norms. I don't know if it is true.
No, lived experience of what? What is she having an experience of on a day-to-day basis of raising a child?
Right, raising a child.
Right. So as a researcher, you have to have the capacity to get into her mind and say, what about raising a child as an unwed mother? What are some of the challenges that she might be facing?
Right.
Does she face helplessness? Does she feel isolation? Because now she's an unwed mother, so neighbors don't want to interact with her. She's living alone, right? Then she has to have somebody to take care of the child while she goes to work, right? So she has to juggle a lot of different priorities. So you're looking at the lived experience of this mother to raise a child in a single family home. Let me give you another example. What is it like for an engaged employee to be working in a predominantly virtual organization? Virtual, mind you, virtual organization.
Can you just repeat it once again, Anil?
Sure.
Please.
What is it like for an engaged employee working in a predominantly virtual organization? A lot of organizations today are virtual, right? Especially after the pandemic. You know, people have done away with the offices and all that because they're saying everybody can work virtually. What is the need for people to drive an hour, fight traffic, and especially in India where some of the cities are so crowded, it's difficult for people to get to office. From point A to point B, it can take you 1.5 hours, sometimes 2 hours. So if the employee can work out of their own homes using the fascinating magic of internet and connectivity and all of that, why have them come to the office to do what? To show up? Yes, they can come to the office once a week just for interaction, but rest of the time they are all adults. They're all responsible employees. They'll do the job. So what is it like for an engaged employee to be working in a predominantly virtual organization? So now, if that question, what would be the study phenomena?
Similar to what Ajanta had actually mentioned, the challenges faced by the engaged employee of working from home with no interaction.
Okay.
So some of the established studies and associating his lived experience
Okay.
to compare it with the established studies.
Okay. So I understand some of the challenges, but really speaking, what is it like for an engaged employee? Why did I put the word engaged there?
Yeah, I wanted to understand, are you talking about the fact that this particular employee is likely to get married and that is how he is engaged?
No,
Or is he getting
engaged.
engaged with the
No,
work?
I was not meaning.
Totally
I was not
engaged in the
meaning-
job. Totally
Arre bhaiya,
engaged in the
Janta,
job.
I was
Okay.
not talking about marital
Okay.
engagement.
No, that's what I was just wondering. Yeah, okay.
Just kidding. I was talking about like companies want engaged employees, not employees who are engaged to marry.
Yeah, who are focused basically, who are focused.
Focused, who committed,
Got it.
who are right. So involved. Employee. So when I said engaged employee, what is like for an engaged employee? So is the phenomena not employee engagement that we are talking about? What is it that we are trying to research there? Are we trying to research
emotions? Again, the emotions, the feelings,
Perhaps.
the advantages, disadvantages.
I think we are trying to
like there may be some distractions if he is working from home, like his family may be there, like which may be distracting in their work, like maybe a children or maybe some
So
other
the extent
people
of
coming
engagement,
and
the level of engagement.
Yeah.
It's
Level
that
of
we are
engagement.
looking at. So you have, when you're doing research, you have to put an expression around the phenomena. Well, what is the phenomena that you want to research? Companies do research. Organizations do research. They do research on something. On something. There is a phenomena that is occurring. So unless you're able to properly articulate the study phenomena, you don't know where your research is going.
The mental state that the employee undergoes every day, every minute.
Right? That what is it that makes that person an engaged employee, a committed employee,
Motivation.
a loyal employee, a productive employee?
There can be a lot of aspects which are making
There can be a lot of
engaged.
aspects. So, and by the way, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that the phenomena is employee engagement in that question. It could be something else too. What could be, like somebody said, what are the challenges when you are not showing up in a four walls office, right? What could be some of the challenges that people face? Some people are not disciplined enough to work from home all the time. They want interaction, they want meetings, they want to be able to go to the water cooler, they want to be able to talk to their colleagues and all. And it's very there's a lot of isolation.
But they could also have advantages. Like you said, with cities with traffic, they could be spending that time on their work, especially if they're focused on it.
Exactly. So a company would want to see what is it like for an engaged employee to be working in a virtual organization. So if a person is working only virtually, or the entire organization is virtual, what is it about virtuality that either enhances or discourages an engagement? It could enhance engagement, but it could also discourage engagement. But for instance, if I'm the kind of person, I like to walk and talk and all that, and a lot of people, I hate to use the word, we all have done that, been there, done that. We wasted time talking and gossiping and all that, and sometimes the work doesn't get done, right? Not everybody is as disciplined as Kiran, right?
I wish.
So I'm saying that to understand the phenomena is very, very important. That's why I spent time here to giving you some examples but because when you're embarking on research, and especially those that are getting into academic research, like Ranjita is starting her journey at ISEC in Bangalore for PhD. Ranjita, you will have to understand these study phenomena,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Right? Correct?
Yes,
So,
sir.
so unlike quantitative studies, the volume of data can be enormous. I just said that. So in quantitative studies, the data is less because you're using numerics. Data can contain numerous overlapping ideas, some of which may appear contradictory to the researcher who's tasked with making meaning of something. So there's a lot of ambiguous data, abstract data. How do you make sense of these overlapping? We call them imbrigation. It's kind of like, have you seen Mangalore roof tiles, one on top of another, right? So there's one tile, then there's another tile on top, there's another tile on top, another tile on top. So these are overlapping ideas and tiles one on top of another. There's so many ideas, so many concepts that overlay on each other. And how do you make sense of all of this? There is no preset roadmap or boilerplate to fall back on. The inherent lack of structure can be very problematic for an employee or for a researcher because they're looking for structure. That's why there can be challenges of working virtually, because people that are very much into structure, this paper will come, I'll take care of this, and then we'll go to the next person, and then we'll have a meeting together in the meeting room and discuss some ideas. If you're used to that kind of human interaction, it can be very challenging to switch to a virtual interaction. Is it not? Right? So rather than a researcher leading the study, which is often the case in the positive scientist might do, qualitative research may call upon you as a researcher to remain open to being led by the emergent data. So in quantitative research, you are leading as a researcher, you're leading the data. And in qualitative research, the data might start leading you. What do I mean by that? But you might get data and then you were looking for something and actually you end up finding something else. So you might have to change the direction of the focus of your study. So the data is turning you, changing you around into a different direction. This may often be a troublesome notion to a researcher who's not comfortable with incertitude and not knowing. So if you're not very comfortable with uncertainty, this can become very challenging. So I would encourage those that are not comfortable with not knowing and not doing and this high degree of uncertainty, you can have some challenges. So I would have you seriously consider whether this makes sense to you to be in qualitative research. You may want to go ahead and do a quantitative study instead. Okay. So paradoxically, bilateral, unlike quantitative research where the researcher assumes a hands-off relationship, in quantitative research, the researcher wants to stay away and have a hands-off relationship with the data. They may want to remain distant because they don't want to corrupt the data. But getting too engaged, they don't want to get too comfortable with the participant or the respondent. Sometimes they don't even want to know who the respondents are. They'll send 500 questionnaires. They don't know who these people are. They just found it off a list. But in qualitative research, you may be doing 10 interviews with people that you are getting close to, intimate with, because you're asking them a lot of really deep, emotional type questions. Because why? You're trying to co-create knowledge. That might be a confusing notion. So what do you mean by co-creation of knowledge? Are you not as a researcher, am I not the one who's creating the knowledge? What is the participant? The participant is only answering my questions. So how are we co-creating? In qualitative research, there is a great deal of subjectivity. Everybody knows the objective, subjective, right? Subjective is very feeling laden, emotion laden. There's a great deal of subjectivity, and I'll go one step further by saying intersubjectivity. Means you as the researcher are impacting the participant, who in turn is impacting you. So we are both, in a manner of speaking, impacting each other. The researcher's skill lies in maintaining objectivity and allowing participants to freely express themselves while eliciting thick data. So when we say thick data, we are looking for quality data, rich data, voluminous data, lots of stories, lots of narratives, because you're going to make sense of that. You're going to make interpretations out of that. So the researcher does not intrude, direct, or otherwise manipulate participants, only keeps them focused on the study phenomena. So the researcher will not intrude, direct, or otherwise manipulate participants, only keeps them focused on the study phenomena. So when you're doing research like that, you're keeping them focused on the study phenomena. Okay. This is an alien and troublesome concept to quantitative scientists. This is a troublesome notion, because in quantitative research, they're directly intruding that I want the research done in a certain way. They're already expecting certain outcomes from the research. Right? So all of these are challenges to qualitative research. That's why it's not easy for a person to do this kind of research. It takes a very special person, and that's why this is an in-depth seminar. I'm getting into the very basics, weeds of, some of you might be thinking it's too basic. For some people, it's maybe too basic. For others, it's too new. But it's important for both parties to understand that until you really get a hang of all of this stuff, that this is not going to be taught in a workshop. I'll bet you attend those workshops, they're not going to go into all this detail. They'll just say, this is what qualitative research is, this is what quantitative research is. Qualitative mein ye techniques hoti hai, quantitative mein ye techniques hoti hai, this is the contrast, this is what we do. That's not the way I work. I like to really spend a lot of time in going through really the groundwork of that. If you don't lay a good foundation, you cannot have a good house built on it. If you don't understand the philosophical and the theoretical underpinnings of a research methodology or a research approach, you're not going to end up doing good research. So researcher reflexivity, one of the concepts that you're going to hear, and with this, we will just take a few minutes stretch so that everybody can take a deep breath. But I want to talk about the researcher reflexivity before we do that. In qualitative research, the data that you collect, okay, the data collected by a researcher who fully acknowledges that the data may have been impacted by the researcher's own ideas, thoughts, and biases. So the data has already come into being because the researcher may have carried some biases. So for instance, if you have a strong opinion about unwed mothers, let's say you have a moralistic viewpoint on that unwed mothers should not bring babies into this world. You only have to have babies coming into this world after you are married. And that's okay. But if as a researcher, you have strong views on that, you are not going to be able to do good research on that because you will have your own biases and perceptions and ideas into that. The researcher clearly reflects on and delineates the challenges, experiences, assumptions, and predicaments that she may have faced. So you have to be able to understand what it is that you you are carrying by way of a bias. And how's that bias might be affecting the research, affecting the data collection. So you have to consider that. If we call these biases interferences, these interferences are also considered to be data. But this is consciously bracketed by you. So your biases, your opinions, your thoughts, your attitudes about something, about the phenomena, you have to keep them aside, keep them bracketed, put them aside for the purpose of the research so that you don't allow consciously these to creep into the research. You want to allow the participant the freedom to express himself or herself freely without any impediment. So reflexivity involves a subjective process of self-consciousness. So it's a very self-triggered sort of process of self-reflection, refrain, which takes you into that phenomena. So you have to keep those attitudes, feelings, thoughts about the phenomena aside for the purpose of the research. Let the participant say what he or she wants to say. All right. So on that note, let us just take a couple of minutes as a stretch break because everybody is sitting for a while. And let's meet together in what, 3 or 4 minutes? 3 minutes? Is that okay? And then we'll go into the next segment. Okay, let's get back. All right, so the questions that often come up in qualitative research are as follows. When is qualitative research appropriate? I mean, what are some of the situations where qualitative research lends itself to a good strategy? What kind of research questions does qualitative research answer? And what kind of data does qualitative research generate? And how do we interpret such data? So the first one is, when is qualitative research appropriate? When do we do? What kind of questions, what kind of topics do we research in qualitative research? What kind of research questions do we have to have that can be well answered by qualitative research? What kind of data does it produce? Right? Kind of data, meaning obviously it's going to be non-numeric data, thoughts, feelings, emotions, people's stories, episodes, encounters. You know, as they are thinking about the past experiences, lived experiences, they're sharing those experiences to you, which you're recording. Usually, if you're doing live recordings, then you're doing it via recorder. If you're doing virtual, like a lot of people are doing virtual, it already generates a transcript, right? Like Zoom generates a transcript, and then you can go back and look at the transcript and see what themes might be emerging out of it. So you can code the transcript accordingly. And how do we interpret such data? One of the challenges is people collect data. They'll have great interviews. They'll have really excellent time that they spend with participants. But how do you interpret? How do you make sense of such voluminous data? That becomes the million-dollar question. Okay. So qualitative research is a scientific method of observation. It's a method of observation to gather non-numeric data. This type of research refers to the meanings, concepts, characteristics, metaphors, symbols, and description of things rather than their counts or measures. It deals with thoughts, opinions, perceptions, and emotions as they make sense of a study phenomena. So as the researcher makes sense of a study phenomena, the researcher is asking participants to reflect on a study topic, study phenomena, or on a research question. So qualitative research methods, when applied to social sciences, best study the why and how, as I believe Kiran said, the why and how of human experience, as opposed to when, where, or who. Not that those are unimportant, but the why and how. Why do things happen the way they do? How do they happen? How do they unfold? Sometimes in qualitative data, we are establishing correlations, causality, one thing causing this. What are the factors that cause this? At other times, we are not concerned with causality because your purpose is to understand the essence of a phenomena at its deepest level of pathos. So when you're understanding the emotions, etc., it may not be necessary for you as a researcher to understand why the person is having such and such feeling or why the person is experiencing such and such emotion. Because the purpose of your research is a phenomenological study, let's say, to understand what that emotion means to the participant. What are the meaning structures that are ascribed to that emotion, to that feeling? So just keep that in mind. There are a variety of qualitative research methods and designs available to the researcher. These are driven by the research question. So remember one thing, and I'm talking here more from its standpoint of an academic research study and not necessarily an application within an organization, because they may have a different way of going about the research. But I'm talking about purely academic, in which a research question has to be established. Depending upon the way a question is framed, we could be looking at different qualitative research methods. So there's a lot of qualitative research methods. There's action research, there's ethnography, there's ethnomethodology, there's narrative inquiry, right? There is phenomenology, grounded theory, discursive analysis. So there's a lot of different methods. So the question is, what method should you use? What strategy, what approach should you use? It's not that, sometimes students will fall in love with a certain methodology or a certain approach because they just attended a seminar on phenomenology. Now everybody's jumping on that and saying, "Arey, sir, we want to do phenomenology." Why do you want to do phenomenology? I don't know, sir. Bahut exciting. It's too exciting, sir. It's too good. I understand, we've all been there. We all fall in love with certain methodologies because we understand that, we can relate to that. But your methodology is not what drives your research question. Your research question is what drives your methodology. So let's give you, and I think I'm coming to that in the next frame. Let me talk about that. Okay, so here you go. Crafting research questions and the suitable approach that we use to research, to follow those research questions. So Karanjita, pay special attention here. Okay. So let's say an example research question in the first column. Second column is key features of the research question. And the third thing is the approach that we follow. So if your first research question is, what are the main experiential features of being abused? What are the main experiential features of being abused? That's the research question. If you note in the features, the emphasis on the common structure of abuse, the genetic structure of abuse, albeit indirectly experienced by a participant. So if you ask 10 people, can you tell me about emotional abuse? Whether they have gone through emotional abuse or not gone through emotional abuse, they can certainly say something about emotional abuse, because they can talk about it indirectly without having experienced emotional abuse themselves, right? And the approach that we use for that is phenomenology, because phenomenology may be deployed to answer this question. This is an example of thatness. The participant may have had a lived experience of the phenomena of abuse. So indirect lived experience, but without actually going through that experience themselves. Second question, how does someone who has lived with abuse make sense of?
One question, what is a indirect lived experience? Lived experience is like going through
indirect lived experience. Great question. Did everybody hear VM's question? So what is an indirect lived experience and what is a direct lived experience? Direct lived experience is such, let us say, if you're doing a health science type of research. So Ajanta, if the thing is, what is it like for people suffering from chronic, what is it like for a person to suffer from chronic lower back pain? Now,
so it's like, yeah, so it's like I suffer, so it's a direct experience.
Exactly.
But because I suffer, my family members, my husband, my kids, everybody's put in trouble. So that is the indirect experience. I mean, they can't throw me out. So in fact, they have to bear all this. So I guess that is the indirect experience.
Indirect. So unka experience, Ajanta, becomes indirect, right, because they are seeing you suffer from that pain, right, but they are not the wearer of the shoe. The wearer of the shoe is you.
Right.
You are having the, so when I, as a researcher, if I want to understand the direct lived experience, I will have to recruit participants like Ajanta,
Absolutely.
who are suffering from, I don't wish it on you, by the way, Ajanta. I know lower back pain is terrible.
Perfectly all right.
I've
So
had
happy
that.
to be
I've had
humble.
that in the past, and it is a horrible thing. I would not wish it on anybody. It's a horrible thing. You cannot get out of bed. You feel like a cripple some days. So I will have to recruit people, when I say people, participants like Ajanta, like somebody else who has had that experience and can tell me about that experience. The challenges with that experience. What does, so my question to Ajanta will not be, aapko kyun hota hai? That is not my question. Why does it happen to you? Now she may say that when I wake up in the morning and if I suddenly have woken up quite quickly rather than slowly getting out of bed, I get a twitch in the lower back and I get a lot of pain. But if I roll off slowly, now you may say that, but my question to you, my research phenomena is lower back pain. I want to understand how you make sense of lower back pain.
There's a slight dichotomy in the mind regarding this question and research question and the key features. So the research question here talks about what are the main experiential features of being abused. So being abused, I think it should be, the participant should be the one who's being abused rather than passive.
Actually, you are very correct, VM. I should actually maybe correct that and say, what are the main experiential features of abuse?
Abuse, yeah.
Not being abused means now we are talking about somebody who's going through that abuse. So thank you for pointing that out. Very nice. I appreciate that. I'll make a change. So, but we are talking about right now the second one, the direct lived experience of abuse. And it could be direct experience of cancer, dialysis. What is it like to be marginalized and as an LGBTQ community member? I've done a lot of work with, not when I say a lot of work, I have many students who have, doctoral students who have been researching on the LGBT community, especially on transgender and their sexuality and also queer and, people. So there's a lot of new research that is emerging, very fascinating research that is emerging. And it's a very sensitive topic. So how do you go about collecting data from a transgender individual? They're not going to give you data if you come across as manipulating them for your own purpose, right? So they will say कि मैं हम आपको क्यों बताएं अपनी stories? क्यों बताएं? Why should I tell you what is happening to me on a day-to-day basis? हाँ, आप उसका क्या करेंगे डेटा का? रहने दीजिए हमें अपने हाल पे. And if your study is around transgender community, who are you going to interview? You're going to interview transgender individuals, right? And if you cannot get through to them, how do you make sense of that? See where I'm going with this? So on that point, you have to spend, first of all, you have to be an authentic, genuine, original researcher. Number one. Number two, it's not just okay to say, Haji, आप अपने transgender community में से हमें 10 लोगों को recruit करना हमने, तो हम हर एक को 500 रुपए देंगे. That is not enough. That is actually an incentive that can work against you. You have to win their confidence. I have a very young lady who I'm helping out. She's applying for a PhD overseas that has actually spent an enormous amount of time within the Hijra community in trying to get to know them, in trying to get comfortable with them. And then they open up to you because now they know you are researcher, आपने PhD कर रहे हैं, तो हमको मालूम है कि आप research कर रहे हैं, तो you need the data, you need all of that. But इस data को please hamara naam mat lijiye, and you know, they might say to you, keep it anonymous. Because not that they're afraid of anything, they're basically afraid that their guru might come to know. Because they all have gurus, they all have their seniors in that they don't want them to get angry with them. So I guess what I'm saying is winning the confidence over of a participant is critically important, because if we don't win somebody's confidence, you're not going to be able to collect good quality data. First of all, they won't agree to the interview. So let's go on to the third question. What factors influence how people manage abuse? You see, if you notice, has everybody noticed that I'm talking about the phenomena of abuse in all three questions? VM, did you see that?
Yes.
All three questions has the same phenomena of abuse. I'm researching abuse, but the moment I change and craft the question differently, my key features are changing. My methodology that I'm using, the suitable approach that I'm using, also changes. So let's look at the third one. What factors influence how people manage abuse? If you note that the emphasis is on explanation and causality. When we say factors, we are saying one thing causing another. Is it not? So what factors influence how, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question here. Can we interpret qualitative data to be, I mean, factors do influence it, but can we call that causality when it comes to qualitative data?
When we are saying one thing is causing another. So I didn't follow your question. Can you just repeat your question for me? Yeah.
So here the question is, what factors influence how people manage abuse?
Yes.
So let's say that through these interviews, we're able to extract some of the factors that they're saying. But can we really say that these factors cause the abuse? Like, can that word be used? Because it's very sensitive to use it in quantitative research.
Yes. So when we are saying that we've collected the data, so
yeah,
if the data, when we say factors, what are some of the factors?
Like, can we say that it increases the likeliness of abuse, or is it safe to say that they cause the abuse?
Okay, so the only reason why I put the causality there is to establish here, to make a contrast between the three different questions, that when you're talking about factors leading, what are the factors that lead students to become better learners, let's say.
Okay.
So the only reason I'm using causality, so don't confuse the causality with the quantitative side. I'm only using this expression. Maybe I should use a different expression. I hear you. Maybe I should use a different expression there, because it could lead somebody to think.
It could lead it to, but I think the term you just used is like, it could lead to abuse.
It could lead, right? It could lead to abuse. And so when you're saying causality, I'm trying to establish here that the moment you're trying, so in other words, what are the reasons why something is happening, right?
Yeah.
So when we are asking a participant, can you give me the reasons why you feel this way? So you sound sad all the time. Can you give me a reason why you feel sad all the time? And first of all, she may not answer my question, and then she may look at me funny, but if she has a little bit of confidence and faith in me, then I might stay and I might keep quiet before, and I give her some time to think. So what am I trying to, so when I say a reason, typically something is, okay, I'm not going to use the word cause. something is catalyzing something else. Something may be triggering something else. Maybe there was a memory. Maybe she had a traumatic experience in her childhood. And something about a family member or someone else, some other personality, reminds her of that emotional trauma. That triggers that memory in her. You know, you heard of the way trauma occurs, right, in people, and how they go through trauma. There are triggering events. Unconsciously, something can get triggered, and before you know it, they're really breaking down in tears, and you don't know what happened because you didn't ask a wrong question. So I only use the word causality to be able to establish the difference between these three questions. The moment you put causality means what factors influence. What is some of the reasons that this is happening? Right, just to paraphrase it. What is the reason? What are some of the underlying scenarios why this happens this way? You're looking at, when you talk about factors, you're looking at grounded theory. Because grounded theory is an approach or a methodology where you're discovering either new theories that have never existed before or refining an existing theoretical framework. It's a very involved process. We'll talk about grounded theory tomorrow, but I just wanted to share this with you because, and this can look like a lot of information on this table, but really, if you look at it in a very simple way, your first one is an indirect experience. The second is the direct experience. The third is something that we're causing some factors to occur. What are the factors? So if you understand that your research question is what guides the methodology. If you notice that in the first one, just simple phenomenology was fine, because phenomenology could be looking at an indirect experience of abuse, or what is your indirect experience of, what is your experience of demonetization that occurred a few years ago in India, right? Everybody can say something about demonetization. But if you go into very specific, how did demonetization affect your finances? Now you're talking about a very direct experience that you had. So
can we take away this thing that if it is an indirect experience, we will apply phenomenology?
No, not necessarily, not always. I'm just giving you some examples. You can apply, you can have narrative inquiry also, you can do for indirect. Phenomenology
shall I interpret the other way then? So phenomenology I'll apply if it is an indirect experience.
Yeah, so I'm saying that phenomenology may be applied. You could apply other approaches too, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. VM, other approaches too. So I don't want you to get hooked on just the phenomenology. I was just taking an example. So to answer this indirect research question, a simple phenomenological study could be fine. But the moment I go into interpretative phenomenological analysis, in the second one, look at the far right here. You see my cursor here? The RQ may be answered by interpretative phenomenological analysis, also known as IPA. It is an approach of analysis within the field of phenomenology that directly studies direct lived experience. So IPA, when you're doing IPA, and by the way, IPA is very widely used in health science research. It's used by medical professionals. It's used by health psychologists, think tanks, because when you're researching a specific phenomena through direct lived experience of those patients, you're using IPA. Okay. So let me move on to this. The vagaries of qualitative research. You will observe that even though the phenomena of abuse, so I've just basically deconstructed my previous slide. So let's look at this. So you will observe that even though the phenomena of abuse remains the same in all research questions we have, each question points the research in a different direction using different methodologies. Each outcome may also be different depending on what the research study is seeking to accomplish. So if you're seeking to accomplish just understanding the essence of a phenomena, that is what you're going to get. If you're understanding reasons or rationale or factors, then your questions have to be modified in that way to be able to elicit those kind of responses from participants. Unlike quantitative research, where the data collected is numeric, the data collected and analyzed in qualitative research is highly subjective. So this is the part that gives people the most problem, researchers. The data is all subjective. Your supervisor is going to say, so how are you making sense of this? This is your opinion. This is your opinion. How do you know if this is true or false? One thing always remember, that when you're doing subjective studies of this nature in qualitative research, you are not going after whether something is true or false. You're not checking somebody's honesty. Because when people are telling stories, sometimes they embellish it a little bit. Sometimes they exaggerate. Your goal as a researcher is not to judge them as to whether they're telling you the fact or telling you something that is not the fact. A skillful qualitative researcher does not begin the study with the final outcome in mind. So remember one thing, in qualitative research, you do not begin with the final outcome in mind. You remain open to surprise, open to the vagaries of research. You remain open to convolution. You remain open to imbrication, to overlapping ideas. The dots, there are so many dots. How are the dots going to connect? You don't know as you're collecting data. She's also willing to change course midway through the research. So you have to be open to changing course midway if in fact the data is leading you somewhere else. Because you may start collecting a lot of this data and then suddenly find, oh my goodness, my data is going in a totally different direction. So you can't say, no, but I started out with this thing, I have to go on this path only, even though the data is suggesting otherwise. So that's why, if you remember in the previous slide, I'd said that data is what leads you as a qualitative researcher. So that is a huge difference between quantitative and qualitative studies. Okay. Final thoughts. So I would like to conclude here by saying that there is a great deal of variety and range of approaches. So I don't want you to think that phenomenology, IPA, grounded theory are the only approaches. I'm just giving you examples of when approach might be used or deployed as the question changes. Okay. So such as phenomenology, grounded theory, case study method, ethnography, ethnomethodology, action research. The research is advised to use caution before embarking on a specific methodology. So be very careful before you jump on a methodology. All right. Because you really have to see what is your research question, what is your research objective, what is it really you're trying to accomplish in this research. Okay. Do not fall in love with the methodology and then go looking for a research question. Don't put the cart before the horse. Think about, deliberate on the research question, your research topic. What is the purpose of this research? What gaps in literature are you trying to address, etc. Spend a great deal of time thinking about the research question. Narrow it down to 1 or 2 sentences at the most. Your research question is not a whole paragraph. Maximum, it could be 1.5 lines. Make sure that your question is researchable and contains the phenomena you wish to study. So you don't want to have a research question which says, I want to research on how many clouds are there in the sky at this time. That's not researchable. So you want to make sure that the research objective that you get embarking on, that it's a researchable endeavor. Narrow it down, make sure that your question is researchable, resist the temptation to rush to an outcome before it is even achieved. So don't get into an outcome before you're actually able to get to that point. Remain open to surprise. Certain approaches such as phenomenology do not seek an outcome. You may only have certain findings to report. So in phenomenology, we look at the essence of a phenomenon. When I use the first two research questions, what is it like for an unwed mother to raise a child in a single family household? That was a phenomenological research question. Because my participants will be single family mothers raising children, right? Because I want to understand their direct lived experience. The second question was, what is it like for an engaged employee to be working in a predominantly research organization, predominantly virtual organization? So I'll be recruiting people who are feeling really engaged and committed while working for a virtual organization. Maybe difficult to find those participants, but they're out there. They say we love it. So what is it that makes them feel so engaged when they're working in a virtual organization versus working in face-to-face, bricks and mortar organization? So references, some of the references that I used before. I know that we have gone a little over that I wanted to talk about, but this was an important segment before we get into tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be heavy into two distinct approaches, methodologies: IPA, interpretative phenomenological analysis, and grounded theory. Very heavy approaches. And they're inductive approaches, both of them, because inductive meaning from specific cases to general observations. And the opposite of that is deductive. Whereas from a grand theory, you're coming and solving a specific problem. The deductive approaches are generally used in quantitative studies. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to just wind it down for today and just ask you if you have any questions, observations, thoughts, feelings around this. Did you learn something, not learn something? Did it trigger something in you, catalyze something in you that you can take away from today?
I still have this doubt in my mind. You have been using this phenomenology and interpretative phenomenology exchangeably, especially in the last part. You told about that experience of
Okay, no, I did
single
not.
mother children.
By the way, interpretative phenomenological analysis and phenomenology I have not used interchangeably, by the way. Let's go back. The first one is phenomenology, right?
Yeah.
Phenomenology.
Here it was fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Phenomenology
the
is
closing
not the
statement.
same.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying phenomenology is not the same as interpretative phenomenological analysis.
Yeah.
The
So
interpretative
how does that example?
Go ahead.
How does that example of yours regarding raising of children, single mother child raising a child out of wedlock? How does it fall into phenomenology? Because you mentioned that is a phenomenological study.
No.
Is it an interpretative phenomenology?
Yes, because when you're doing that, I just used phenomenological study, meaning generally speaking, it uses phenomenology as one of its pillars. Okay. So the interpretative phenomena, so just remember, interpretative phenomenological analysis is a specific tool within phenomenology to analyze data that is direct lived experience.
Understood.
So think of it as the overarching umbrella. Overarching umbrella is phenomenology.
Yeah.
It is definitely phenomenological. It is not any other approach. But because we are dealing with direct lived experience, we use this interpretative phenomenological analysis to deconstruct the data.
So what is the phenomena there in that single mother case? So here abuse example, this abuse is the phenomena, that is clear. But in the example of
Single
mother
mama
child,
case, my God, you're going to have lots. Helplessness is one.
okay, okay.
Isn't she helpless? Doesn't she feel helpless throughout
Yes.
the day?
Challenges.
Challenges, helplessness, isolation.
Yeah.
You know, the feeling, where is my next paycheck going to come from? How are my babies going to be taken care of? So we'll talk about that when we get into the interpretative phenomenological analysis tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll do the IPA first, which is interpretative phenomenological, and then we are going to get into the grounded theory. So, and then what I'm also going to try to do is, if we have some time remaining, we look at the applications for industry that these approaches are deployed for. Okay. So with this, I just wanted to open it up. Any questions, concerns for a few minutes?
So I have a question. So
Right.
even the second case of employee engagement, which you were talking about, you
Yes.
said you will be actually looking out for people who are working in a virtual setup,
Yes.
right? So you are going to look at the direct experiences, lived experiences of these people.
Correct.
So even that is an IPA.
Yeah, right. Now you can, yes. So what I'm saying is, because phenomenology has different branches, there is a hermeneutic phenomenology, there's descriptive phenomenology, right? There's transcendental phenomenology, and many others, by the way.
And in the same
Deconstructionist
study,
phenomenology, sociological phenomenology. So I was only, because if I shared with you all of those approaches, we would be sitting here for a whole year. There's such a lot of different approach to doing it. So I want.
Could you give me an example, sir, for the same employee engagement question?
Yeah.
The problem.
Yeah.
What would be a phenomenology study if I do not look at the direct lived experiences? If I look at the indirect lived experiences.
Okay, so the indirect, so then the question has to be changed. If you want to look at the indirect experience, what is it like for engaged employees to be working in an organization? Okay, now stay with me, Nupal, for a second. So if I change that question, but first question was, what is it like for an engaged employee to be working in a predominantly virtual organization? If I change that question, what is it like for an engaged employee to be working in an organization? Now, that can be answered by somebody who is not even part of an organization, but can reflect on what is an engagement. Everybody has an opinion about engagement, right? So if I was to look at engagement as an indirect experience, right? Engagement as an indirect experience, I can do a phenomenological study. You can do a whole phenomenological study on engagement and recruit people who tell me their opinions about what is it like for engaged employee to be working in an organization. Yes, sir, they're very committed people. They're very loyal to the organization. They have good interpersonal skills. They have good technical
but the
functional.
participants in both are going to be the same, right?
Not necessarily. Here's where I want you to make a distinction.
Okay.
If you're looking at indirect experience, you do not necessarily have to have participants who are working in that organization.
Okay.
So you could ask anybody. I could ask any informed person, okay, what do you think about engagement and engaged employee in an organization?
Okay.
So because my focus, and this is a very good question, Nupal, by the way. I love this question because this is prodding into it, going deep into it. Because when the purpose of your research, go back to the purpose of your research. The purpose of that research study is not direct experience. It is understanding universally what is engagement meaning to anybody and everybody out there.
Okay, now I get it.
Now you get it. So if the moment I shift gears and say, I need to know directly the experience, I'll give you an example. The example that I took, what is the experience, or what is it like for people to experience lower back pain? Now, if I use that same question and if I want to understand it indirectly, so anybody, like Ajanta was saying, that are family members who are experiencing Ajanta, going through that lower back pain, can reflect on, can say something, my God, it is really painful. It's horrible. The person hurts. That person is not going through the pain, but they're experiencing Ajanta going through the pain. The moment you experience somebody else going through that experience, that is not your direct experience. So you as a researcher have to decide, do you want to go for direct experience or indirect experience? So what is it like for people to experience earthquakes? Anybody and everybody can say something about that experience, even though they have not been in that particular earthquake. But they can say, हाँ, earthquake में ये हो जाता है, buildings गिर जाती हैं, ये हो जाता है, वो हो जाता है, right? Lot of losses, lot of people, sometimes lives are lost. Everybody knows that. This is general knowledge. But if I ask you specifically, what was it like to have experienced that massive earthquake in Lucknow that happened on August 18th, 1978? Now I'm asking you
IPA.
to relive that experience with me of that date, because you were present there. So I will have to recruit people who actually experienced that earthquake in Lucknow on that date. So this is where the nuance comes. This is where
Thank you so much for
no,
differentiating.
absolutely. And we'll discuss a little bit more about this as we get into IPA tomorrow, because it's direct lived experience versus indirect lived. Sometimes people just want to generically understand a research phenomenon. They don't want to go into the direct lived experience of people. But most of my research in phenomenology has been using IPA as a direct research method. I love the IPA approach because it takes me directly into the direct lived experience of people. They want to understand, as an LGBTQ community member, as a queer person, as a single mother, as somebody that is suffering from pain, as so many other different things we can think of. For me, it's more important to understand and come to terms with what is that exact direct linkage. So I know we've gone 5 minutes over. I thank you so much. It's all very late for you. It's 9:30 now for you. I want to thank each and every one of you for your participation. This was a very involved conversation. I'm so glad that everybody was participating and everybody was on board with at least with what we were discussing. So some of the concepts take some time to sink in, right? It's a very vast field. And because of the lack of structure in the field, sometimes it can become a little complicated to understand. So tomorrow we will jump into the two approaches right away. The IPA will do, and then we'll do grounded theory. And then I'll keep some time aside for applications. What do we do? How do we deploy IPA within an organization, right? To do research within a research organization, not necessarily an academic research organization, but kind of like the research organization that you're using. So if you can also think of, Ajanta, some topics that you would like to talk about tomorrow, I definitely would love to hear from you. tomorrow. All right.
Sure,
So
sure.
have a segment on that because you have such vast experience in the field of qualitative research,
Sure.
but using it in a different way,
Right.
not necessarily for academia.
I just
Okay.
want one thing,
Yeah, go ahead.
to everybody before closing.
Yes.
I'm very indebted, for this discussion. In fact, I wanted all of you to know that I have done live studies with divorcee women, with the transgender, and
Oh
even
my goodness.
people working in the red light areas. It's
Oh my
just silence
gosh, that's
and
amazing.
empathy. It's just silence and empathy. I really mean it. I mean, it's been a very long journey for me. So whatever, Anil, you have been saying, I could just sense it, feel it, and you really took me down the memory lane. I really
Oh
mean
my
it.
goodness, that is so good. So, and thank God for that. At least you'll have a lot of rich data to share with us tomorrow as we talk. And you can talk it generically. You don't have to talk
I'm
about
just saying, this is what qualitative is actually, as a practitioner.
exactly.
I mean, this is what it is. I mean, I can resonate so much. So, I mean, this
Yeah.
is the reality, for the upcoming people and all those academicians, who are here. I've
Correct.
been a practitioner. It just happens, in real life.
Right,
See,
exactly. So thank
Thank
you all for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. And we'll be meeting at the same time tomorrow. Same link to be used. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Take
sir.
care.
Thank
Have
you.
a good,
Thank you,
have a
everybody.
good
Bye-bye.
day.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye-bye.